Welcome back. It's 8:43. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Anne.
Yes, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines, Assistant Editor for The Spectator, Cindy Yu, and Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. And thank you for coming back.
Yeah, it's been superb so
and we're
far.
still talking about the man of the moment, Boris Johnson, because the news is that he's joining GB News as a presenter, programme maker, commentator. I mean, I doubt we'll be able to control what he's going to do, but anyway, it'll be fun having him as part of the GB News setup. So, what do we think of that?
Very exciting.
I mean,
as you say, because it's unpredictable, and that's one of the, maybe that's not the best quality of a prime minister, but that is a good quality in a, in a television personality. Yeah. That's something that makes his speeches interesting. For instance, there's going to be an interesting turn of phrase. There's going to be something a little bit surprising that you're not going to get with some of our more wooden politicians.
No, and he should be worth watching.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what makes him such a good after-dinner speaker as well. Having left office, he's now on the speaker's circuit. God knows how much money he's making.
Well, Tony Blair made an absolute fortune speaking.
And he's much more engaging than Tony Blair. I mean, Tony Blair's worth listening to, but Boris Johnson is engaging as well.
It's interesting as well because Jacob Rees-Mogg does his kind of monologues at the start of his show, and they're actually really thought out. And one of the things that Boris is really good at is being an orator.
Yes.
So if we can channel some of that stuff that we saw in his greatest hits at the top of the show, some of those more Churchillian moments, to actually be more statesmanlike and more prime ministerial when he's actually not in office, that'd be amazing.
That'd be good, but he has this range. He can do the serious, he can do the silly, and I quite like the silly side of it personally.
Other prime ministers have sort of faded into the background a bit. John Major, whilst a very good speaker actually, because I've seen him speak, but he's gone much quieter, hasn't he? Liz Truss is beginning to come out.
She's not quiet.
Well,
she's
very... I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here in a bikini. Yeah, that'd be quite a comeback.
And Tony Blair has set up the Tony Blair Institute, which is isn't it?
Yeah, but he never goes away, that
millions and millions.
Yeah, but David Cameron, Theresa May have taken alternative routes. Theresa May is still a backbencher. She really believes in her constituency MP work, which I think is very admirable. She's not kind of backseat driving with the current government in a majority of cases, with the exception of a few campaigns. And she clearly does her constituency work still.
Yeah, I think a lot of people out there might wish that people like Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and John Major might have not come back, especially during Brexit. Anyway,
I don't know. I think Gordon Brown's come back. When occasionally he does speak, he speaks with a very calm authority. And he seems to be a much nicer person than he was when he was Prime Minister.
I think that kind of institutional memory is important. It is good to have previous Prime Ministers. We're hearing about Tony Blair advising the current Labour Party, which I think makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. It's good for them to learn from past mistakes, past achievements. But what's not good is, someone like Boris Johnson, if he's going to be criticising the current government from the sidelines, as he has done sometimes with the Daily Mail column, and probably will do in GB News show as well, Rishi Sunak's not going to be
it's interesting,
happy with that.
Fraser, the return to Blairism, which of course is sensible if you want to get elected. I mean, in fact, Storm was on the same stage as Tony Blair recently. I wonder if that's helping fan the flames of this current division around Palestine. It's given the hard left currency to come back, a new wedge point, a new point of contact. Got to be careful what you wish for.
Well, it's interesting because, Keir Starmer obviously was elected Labour leader on this quite left-wing platform. He basically promised sort of Corbynism, but with competence. And then very quickly, it was obvious it was not his politics. So he very much annoyed the left. He junked all of his promises, U-turned on everything from tuition fees to top rate of tax or whatever it might be.
Kicked out Corbyn.
Yeah. But this seems to be the one issue where he hasn't got away with moving on from the sort of Corbynite past. This is the one sticking point. I don't quite know why that is, but it's interesting also, figures like Sadiq Khan, Andy Burnham, they're not Corbynites either, but they're very much calling for a ceasefire, causing trouble in Labour. because Starmer's told people don't go on Palestine marches, don't get involved in this, and he's taken almost... people have said his pro-Israel position has gone too far because he appeared to almost say that it's acceptable to cut off water and things like that. He basically giving Israel carte blanche, which is an interesting move. The other thing, of course, is that he's trying to move on from the legacy of anti-Semitism that was in the Corbynite Labour Party, and one way of signalling that is by that he's moving on from that is by supporting Israel. But could that work start to come undone? It would be interesting.
Certainly is. Shall we move on? Cindy, fascinating story here in the Daily Mirror. A nurse jailed over supplying drugs in prison.
Yeah, I mean, so she's been sentenced to 10 years, and when she was caught with over £1 million worth of drugs. So we've got MDMA,
Is she
cannabis.
a nurse who works inside prison?
Yeah, she was a mental health nurse who... Oh, no, sorry, I don't think she was. It's her lover who was in prison. And I think he got her into it. But what they've done is uncovered this whole ring of people who were basically doing this from inside and outside the prison. It says that that man, it was sentenced to 11 years, and he recruited her, he recruited his wife, and he recruited his father into this drug ring. And, you know, it's just incredible. It's just an incredible story that someone so ordinary has been caught with so much drugs.
And it was allegedly the largest jail drug smuggling ring ever uncovered.
Real.
Wonder.
What do you say?
Yes, I know. What do you say? It's amazing, isn't it? What goes on? But we know that drugs are such a huge problem inside prison. Can we go on, Cindy, very quickly then to this the ewe who needs rescuing from a beach?
Yeah, I don't know if we can get a picture of this sheep up, but it's quite sad. Nobody quite knows how the sheep got there, but it is on a remote Highlands cliff. And it's been stuck there for 2 years by itself.
2 years?
2 years.
Wow.
And that...
So it's not on a beach. It is on a beach.
It is on a beach, but because I think it's quite hard to... Well, I'm not quite sure what the logistics of sheep rescue, amphibious sheep rescue would be, but the rescue services are basically saying, you know, we need a shepherd and a sheepdog, and no one is really that concerned about it, except for animal lovers.
Well, you can sort of tell how long she might have been there by the length of her hair.
Exactly, and that's why they think that she can't climb up the way she came down.
And if she got in the water to try to swim, she actually might get waterlogged.
That's right, yeah.
Because she has an awful lot of...
Too much pelt.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But the headline, of course, if you're listening on the radio, the headline is "Please rescue me,"
Yeah.
which is lovely. Sad story. I hope somebody does rescue her.
Tabloid.
Apparently sheep are very social animals as well. You know, they're herd animals. So
Yeah, so she hates being on her own.
Fraser, this is one that might make a few eyebrows raise in GB Newsland. It is Asexuality Awareness Week. Of course, we all knew that.
Yes, who wasn't aware of that? So there's an asexuality activist called Yasmin Benoit, and she's teamed up with Stonewall, the LGBT charity, to produce this report talking about all the ways that asexual people are apparently discriminated against.
Shall we start with the basics for people out there? What is asexual?
Asexual is someone who feels attraction to no one, essentially.
Right.
So people who don't fall in love, rather than, you know, being heterosexual. Obviously, you fall in love with the opposite sex. But yeah, these are people who feel no romantic attachment, have no desire to have sex with other people. And it's believed to be, you know, less than 1% of the population. But what's interesting, they put out this sort of survey. Some of it is just quite eyebrow-raising. There are claims that 10% of asexual people have undergone conversion therapy. I think what they mean is that maybe their parents have said, "Are you going to find a nice girlfriend now?"
Yeah.
And there are reports that asexual people are less happy than heterosexual people.
Well, you'd assume that.
I would assume
that's
so,
the case,
because
yeah.
they're not getting any. But I think I'm fascinated by this because, you know, ultimately there are no rights that asexual people lack. Nobody is forcing anyone to couple up. No one is, you know, there's nothing, you know, you don't lose anything necessarily.
Do they need to be
single.
recognised as a group?
Well, that's what they're asking for. They want asexuality to be recognised in law. I don't see what difference that would make. I don't see it. There's this tendency, though, that every group wants to, you know, feel like they are victimised, and it's really wrong because they're piggybacking off the genuine victimisation of homosexual people that had happened, you know, until very recent decades. People really did face bullying. People were criminalised for being homosexual.
Still happens in Palestine, places like that. Anyway, I digress.
But in the UK, you know, no one is going to come. A police officer is not going to come around your house and lock you up because you don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
But 'twas ever thus. There have always been people who just don't.
Yeah,
Don't fit in, socially awkward.
Yeah, and I also think that, you know, it's always difficult to be a minority in society. You know, any kind of demographic, any political view, whatever it is, it's always difficult to be a minority because people don't understand where you're coming from. They're going to be making offhand comments or whatever it is. But that doesn't mean it's discrimination.
No.
It's always going to be hard swimming against the tide. And that's just fundamentally it. And I think, as Fraser says, in today's day and age, you know, everything has become a narrative of oppression, victimhood, when actually sometimes life is just a bit hard if you're a bit different.
Well, can that take us on to the story you found in the Times about the platonic co-parenting group? Now, this is interesting. This is people who want to be parents but actually don't necessarily want a sexual relationship with a partner.
Or they haven't found anyone by the time they're in their 40s, for example, and they just think, well, you know, my biological clock is running down. I need to have a baby, but I haven't found the right partner. So can I just find someone who I share, you know, similar life goals with, and we can just have a biological baby together and we'll just co-parent.
So this is a bit like finding a donor for an egg or sperm, but it's actually somebody you know, rather than like a stranger on the internet?
No, it is a stranger on the internet. So there are these agencies that are matching platonic partners up to be co-parents. And so it would be more than a sperm donor, because they will actually just both be in the child's life growing up.
So it's somebody, you know, in one village who says, you know, I've always wanted to be a mother and the clock is ticking by. And maybe somebody else in the next village who thinks, I always wanted to be a father and yet haven't found the right person. They get together, they live in the same house and co-parent the child.
I think it depends on exactly how they want to. So one example is they live a few miles apart, so they're quite close, so that the kid doesn't have to go too far. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably not mostly living in the same house.
And I wonder if they'll end up falling in love, because the interesting thing about that
because you've got a common bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you're sharing this beautiful creation that you've co-created, and you know, removing the kind of, you know, the mechanics from that, it's like, well, actually, they might find love.
That sounds like the perfect setup for a nice rom-com.
Of the 21st century, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is what is underneath all of this is that people are having kids later now.
Yes.
Especially women are having kids later, and we see this play out in all sorts of ways. And this is just one of the ways in which
But it makes
women
you think as well of, I mean, I sort of wonder whether I should even bring it up at the moment with what's going on, but if you go to certain kibbutzes, they actually, some of them, don't have individual parents to one child. They co-parent the children together, groups of them, and they apparently raise very, very happy children. And so there are different ways of doing it, but this is maybe just one.
I think it's so fascinating. I also wonder, you know, to Martin, what you were saying, whether the reverse is true. If you don't have romantic love in a partnership, can you raise a child in the same way? You know, what you're saying, Anne, about a group of parents is slightly different. But if you just had two partners and they're not in romantic love with each other, what kind of children do they bring up? I mean, it might not be a problem, but I'm interested in what parental love for each other.
Fascinating stuff, and that's a reflection of the modern age, isn't it?
It really is.
Thank you. Superb. Thank you.
OK, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for seeing us. Right, we're going to be bringing you bang up to date with the very latest news. You're watching Breakfast.